All right, looks like we're live on Facebook now. So welcome everyone to tonight's event. And my name is Dylan Yates and I work with the Nova Scotia Environmental Network. And the Nova Scotia Environmental Network, for some of you who don't know, is a nonprofit organization that was founded in 1991. And we have a membership of 39 environmental organizations across Nova Scotia, whose common purpose is to conserve and enhance the natural environment and build a sustainable future for Nova Scotia. And we strive to support and strengthen and promote environmental work of our members by connecting them to each other, to the government, and to the general public. And that's why we are so delighted to have one of our members here today, Nina Newington from the Extinction Rebellion, to talk about the Last Hope Camp and the struggle to protect an old growth forest in Nova Scotia. So I'll pass things off to Nina and she'll take over from here.
Okay, well, hi everybody, and thanks for joining us. I'm a forest protector and a member of Extinction Rebellion. The Last Hope Camp is actually the third camping on logging roads that I have done. But without much ado, we'll go over to a slideshow and feel free to figure out questions to ask. Oops. Sorry, I think I forgot to share screen. Okay, so I'm going to assume everybody can hear me.
Yeah.
This is okay. So
take your time. Yeah.
Save the Last Hope. All right. So we're at Save the Last Hope Wildlife Corridor. This is a sign somebody painted for us, and we love the artists who make us signs. I'll talk a little bit more about the message of this and where the name Last Hope comes from in a minute. But just to say, where all this began was a Sunday afternoon at the end of November. I happened to see a comment on Facebook from somebody in Annapolis County where I live, saying, oh, I've tried to do everything I can to protect this particular forest, and the Department of Natural Resources and Renewables and West 4 say it's too late to save it, and they're coming in to cut in the next 2 weeks. So I thought that I would call this person. I messaged him and we spoke on the phone, and 2 days later, he showed me and another member of Extinction Rebellion the forest he was talking about. So it was hunting season, that's why we're wearing orange. So the fellow in the distance is Randy Neely. He's a 7th generation resident of this particular corner of Annapolis County, which is over sort of close to the intersection of Highway 10 and Highway 201, so a little bit south from Middleton, in the general area to the west of New Albany, that part of Highway 10.
Nina?
Yes?
We're not able to see the presentation. Are you able to?
All right. Is that better?
No. Do you see where it says share screen at the bottom?
I have to get back out of this to
yeah,
get to
just
that.
right click and end the slideshow.
Okay.
Like we did before, like we discussed before, and then go down to your share screen at the bottom of the Zoom in the green.
Yeah.
Click that and then share to desktop.
Okay, it's telling me I'm sharing. Sorry, everybody.
Oh, it's okay. Technical difficulties.
Okay, can you now see the screen?
We can see your screen. Yeah, we just need to get the PowerPoint presentation up now.
Okay. So can you now see the PowerPoint?
Yes, perfect. So yeah, we'll just play from the start there, up in the left.
Okay.
There we go.
Well, don't mind me while I repeat myself. So this little sign is one that we had painted. This is the owner of Lucky Rabbit, the pottery down in Annapolis. We have a crew I call the Art Brigade who are willing to come on board and paint signs for us. And she came up with this. I'll tell you in a little bit about the name, The Last Hope, for this area. But first, just tell you a little bit of the background to how we ended up camping on this particular logging road for the last 145 days. Which was at the end of November, I happened to see a Facebook post by a local man to where I live in Annapolis County saying, I've tried what I can to protect this forest, but the Department of Natural Resources and Renewables and West 4 are saying they're going to start cutting in the next 2 weeks. And I thought, well, maybe not. So I messaged him, and 2 days later we met, he and I, and this is Debbie from the behind, who does all of our scheduling and coordinating. So Randy Neely in his hunting pinks, hunting orange, is a 7th generation farmer, hunter, trapper from this area. There's a few roads called Neely Road around here. The particular area we're talking about is a little bit west of Highway 10 in the New Albany Trout Lake area, and sort of south from Highway 201. So we met with him, and he talked to us about this forest that had just recently been flagged for cutting. And it's a forest that's the trees are about 80 years old. It's most likely there was a fire came through here about then. It used to be owned by Bowater Mersey, the big pulp mill, and they were clear cutting everything in sight pretty much about 20 years ago. And Randy actually talked them into leaving the forest standing because it wasn't worth much for timber, but it was worth a great deal to wildlife. So this little area that I'm showing you this picture is one of the very few softwood stands. It's what's probably the most valuable to the logging industry. But I should say after Bowater Mersey left it, about 8 years later, 10 years later, they went bankrupt. And as many of you may remember, there was a campaign in which Nova Scotians bought back a lot of land from Bowater Mersey, and it became, quote, Crown land. And people thought that Crown land was going to be treated with more gentleness and more respect, and was going to be used more for recreation and conservation. But what actually happened was that the consortium called West 4, which is a consortium of mills, was created, and the government gave them a license to manage most of those old Bowater lands, which were in Western Nova Scotia and Southwest Nova Scotia. And their treatment hasn't really been any better than Bowater's. So when you think about this 80-year-old forest, which you can see as the standing trees in the distance, you have to also think about the fact that it's surrounded by clear cuts. Some of those clear cuts have begun to grow back. This particular one was on private land and was done last year. But all around this part of the South Mountain has been just devastation. And to make that really apparent, this is a satellite map from a group called Global Forest Watch. So that wiggly thing is the Annapolis River. The red is forest cover loss between 2000 and 2020. So basically, those are almost entirely clear cuts. And the dark areas between are what hasn't yet been cut. So that gives you a little bit of a taste of what kind of scale of devastation has been visited on the South Mountain over the last 20 years, but really a little bit longer than that. So if you look over to the right-hand side of that photograph, you'll see a sort of dark area with a little tiny blue lake in the middle of it. That little blue lake is called McEwen Lake, and we'll come back to that. And the Last Hope camp is sort of on the left side of that dark area, that small remaining area that hasn't yet been cut to hell. So that's all been so much clear cutting. The cut that was proposed for the Last Hope camp, which is a 24-hectare area of forest, that's about 60 acres, was not a clear cut. It was what might pass for ecological forestry. They were planning on taking 30%. Now, they never include into that 30% extraction roads to get the wood out. But what I learned from the conversation with Randy and from looking at what was all around this forest was that this is not a forest that should be cut at all. This is a forest that should be allowed to stand, because its value to wildlife is no different now than it was. In fact, it's greater than it was 20 years ago when Bowater spared it, because there's been even more clear cutting around it. And it is a really vital connection between three different large wetland areas. There's the Crisp Bog and the McEwen Meadows and Beal's Meadows. And species at risk have been associated with it. Wood turtle was actually seen on this new logging road in 2020, as well as down by Beal's Brook, which we'll get to in a minute. Mainland moose are known extensively to be in this area to people who've spent a lot of time here. There's not very many of them left, as most of you know, but we have a photograph from a trail cam from 2020 of one that's literally just in the nearest wet meadow across the logging road. So the other thing about moose in this area, and the reason that this is called Last Hope, was that when Randy was showing Debbie and I around, we came to this very spot where you see this photograph, and there was a large cleared gravelly area which had been cleared by the contractors in order to be able to turn vehicles and pile logs in preparation for the cut. But it also so happened to be the exact location of the Last Hope hunting camp, which was built in 1923 at a time when game was already scarce. And at that point, game meant caribou and moose. The white-tailed deer is an introduction that was brought in to provide something to hunt after the caribou and the moose had been massively reduced in population. But at this point, the reason it was called the Last Hope was that this was such good habitat for moose that even though their numbers were dwindling everywhere else, if somebody hadn't managed to kill their moose to fill their winter larder to get through till the spring, this was the Last Hope place. This is where they came to get their winter meat. So now it has a rather different resonance for us. Last Hope, the endangered moose population isn't really super well known, but it could be as low as 100, it could be as high as 1,000 of the endangered mainland moose in Nova Scotia. So we know that in order to get in the way of logging and protect a forest, it's much, much easier if you get in ahead of the logging equipment, because then you become a deterrent, and with any luck, there's no conflict or anything else. They just decide that it's not really worth coming and dealing with this hassle. So within 4 days of seeing the Facebook post, we came in on a Thursday afternoon and set up this camp. And these folks, there were, I think, 5 of us set up, and then these folks were there by Saturday. Essentially, we had that canvas bell tent was loaned to us, and a Canadian Tire canopy tent that my partner uses for her blacksmith craft shows, and signs that were made for us by assorted local artists. And some of the folks who have been real mainstays of the camp, the two women on the right-hand side, have been, in fact, Sandra in the red vest, red jacket is at camp right now. Quite quickly, we got a small stove that we could put into that bell tent, because by now it was December 2nd, and the nights were getting kind of chillier. One of the things about being at camp is actually, you know, you're outside and you're at camp and it's beautiful. And there's a brook called Beal's Brook, which is very close by, and we hear so we get to hear the sound of the brook. And be camping. So yeah, there's Beal's Brook, and there's the bridge, which they would have to bring equipment over, which is somewhat convenient if you want to be in the way. However, we are at this point an entirely legal protest camp. We're not a blockade. We're camped by the side of the road. Pickup trucks and ATVs and snowmobiles all go through on a fairly regular basis. Pretty quickly, also in the process of setting up camp, we wanted to ask permission of the Mi'kmaq, whose unceded land we're planning on camping on. But it wasn't entirely clear who we should ask. So that was a little bit of a journey, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. We did very early have a visit from Mi'kmaq woman called Darlene Gilbert, sitting up on the rock, who is originally from the Annapolis Valley Band, which is probably the closest of the bands. This also gives you a very nice picture of some of the feel of these rocks. This is a very classic glacial landscape. It's filled with enormous boulders called erratics that the glaciers carried along and then dropped. It's not a very fertile soil. It's a thin, gravelly, acidic soil on top of granite. But when it's left undisturbed for a good long time, such as the 80 years or so that the Last Hope Forest has been there, it's capable of developing quite a interesting ecosystem. And this person actually is Eleanor, who's been a founding member of Extinction Rebellion in Nova Scotia, and in fact in Canada. So the weeks were beginning to pass by, and it was getting colder. And it was becoming rather apparent to me that that little canvas bell tent was quite crowded and difficult, and it would only fit a little tiny wood stove. So we put out a call, and Dirk Van Loon, who is the editor of Rural Delivery, loaned us his old prospector's tent, a very old style one where you build the frame exterior to it. So this was us, and it was sort of funny because we said, well, do you have any instructions? And he said, no, you should watch a YouTube on how to put up a wall tent for mule deer and elk hunting. But we didn't actually, David was helping to put it up, but he didn't actually have data. So I went home and looked at the YouTube and tried to describe over the phone to him how to do this. So amazingly enough, the tent is actually still standing, and became immediately a very important bit of shelter because we were also getting very close to Christmas. So this was a Yule log that Perry Monroe and Sheila, and I think Kelly may even be on this webinar, brought as a gift to camp. And you know, there is something about camping under canvas when it's winter and cold outside that makes you really relish shelter and food and light and candles, and it was quite wonderful to have that. And in case you think we were suffering too much, you know, there was a very nice wood stove that somebody loaned us, our Mark II, and good conversations. you know, because that's the other element of doing something like this, is that the people who are going to be drawn to a camp are on the whole going to be quite interesting. Over the course of the camp, I actually did a little count up the other day. We've had 41 different campers have camped, some for 1 or 2 nights, some for much longer. And over 50 visitors to the camp. Plus, we have lots of people who've supported by donating, and we have Debbie, who I mentioned earlier, and Laura, who really keep kind of everything running by doing the scheduling and the emails and the communications. Because like every other kind of operation, there's a lot to it. So what we didn't really know, of course, was what kind of winter this was going to turn out to be. And this was the first significant snowstorm in early January. Sandra and Melody. Sandra is our oldest camper. She is 77. Our youngest camper so far has been 22. So we've had quite a range. As you can see, the prospector's tent is up with its little chimney. We had been until that point actually sleeping out in unheated tents in the woods, and both Sandra and I concluded when it went to -7 at the beginning of that snowstorm that was too darn cold. So the 3 of us ended up in a 10 by 12 tent for 3 nights together, and we were still getting along at the end, which I wouldn't necessarily have anticipated. The great challenge was finding anyone who was willing to plow a 4-kilometer long logging road, because that's how far we are off Trout Lake, and that's another couple of kilometers off Highway 10. Anyway, logistics are hell. Everything else about camp is fine, but logistics are hell. So this was a happy moment when somebody was finally able to break through the road and we were able to get in and out. We had, in fact, ordered a modern prospector's tent, the one that you see here, back in August, because we had a suspicion that we might end up at least doing this kind of protest camp again and wanting to be able to camp in some degree of comfort along the side of a logging road. This is a duplicate of one somebody lent us, somebody from Pictou County when we were at camp down in Digby County with the moose blockade a year and a half ago. We went ahead and ordered one, and it being COVID, it took quite a long time, and then they were ready to ship it from Vancouver Island on the day that the big floods hit BC. So we didn't get the tent for a while. This was a happy moment of getting this tent up. I put this slide in partly just to say the number of women involved is enormous and quite disproportionate to the number of men, as in probably 3 to 1. And women over 60 are a force to be reckoned with. There's a lot of us, and we're willing to go to bat. And that's an interesting element in itself. The sense of feeling passionately enough to accept being uncomfortable, to accept, going and doing something that feels risky. So this is the inside of that new prospector's tent. I mentioned earlier trying to do some outreach in terms of who to talk to among Indigenous folks about asking permission to be on the unceded and unsurrendered land. Which is reminding me that I did not do a land acknowledgement at the beginning of this. And this is a very good moment to do that and say very explicitly that we are on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and that we are all bound by treaties of peace and friendship. And that we have made a very active commitment to working with Indigenous groups and supporting in whatever way we can their priorities and goals. But we've also been the very fortunate recipient of wonderful support coming towards us. So as many of you know, the band council system with the elected chiefs, those councils only have jurisdiction over the reserves. And it's a system of governance that was created by the Indian Act in 1876. And in many different parts of the country, indigenous folks are recreating more traditional forms of governance. So in Mi'kma'ki, there were 7 traditional districts, and that's what this flag represents. And the flag is actually drawn from a petroglyph that was transcribed by a Mi'kmaq woman in the 1880s. And each of these sort of hummocks and X's or crosses represents the chiefs and the districts of Mi'kma'ki, and they stretch from District 1, Gespewick, which is where we are in the southwest of Nova Scotia, all the way over to the Gaspé Peninsula in Quebec, which is District 7. So the district chief is Marilyn Lee Francis, who's the furthest back with the kind of blue mask half off. But her mother, who's wearing the Father Christmas hat and holding one side of the flag, Marilyn Francis, has also been very involved. And they came to camp along with Marilyn Lee's infant daughter and presented us with this flag, which we fly over the camp. The other person holding the flag is Randy Neely, the man who kind of kick-started all this by standing up for the forest. And what we've been told about the gift of this flag is that it is an invitation to be on territory. And it is also an expression of thanks for the sacrifices that we make to protect the waters and the wildlife. And in the Gaspé Peninsula, in that District 7, the chief there, Gary Metallic, really went to bat for some environmental activists when they were opposing oil drilling by a salmon river. And at the point when the Quebec government was going to go in and arrest them all, he issued them a formal invitation to be on territory, and the government backed off. And the oil well was never put in, perhaps because the government didn't want to get into the kind of legal fight that was. So who knows what would happen, but it's very wonderful to be connected in this way. And I'm a part of a weekly Zoom called The Spirit of Treaty that Marilyn Lee Francis puts on. So on the very same weekend that they came to visit us, which was around about January 21st, 22nd, something else wonderful also happened. And that was that a lichen enthusiast came and on snowshoes went and explored the forest. When we first set up camp, I had put out word to see if there was anybody who knew lichens who would come and take a look in the forest, because some lichens have special species at risk status, and they come with buffer zones. The most famous is probably the boreal felt lichen, and that actually gets a 500-meter buffer. The rest get a 100-meter buffer, meaning that there can be no harvesting or cutting within 100 meters of that specimen. It doesn't shut down a cut. But he found 3 different species at risk. One of them extremely rare, the frosted glass whisker lichen. This is another called black foam lichen. And it has a very common lookalike, which is all around it on the tree. In fact, the first time that I snowshoed out to see this tree, I couldn't really figure out which was the rare one, because it didn't have this handy little bit of ribbon around it. Even though it had a red tape tied directly above it, I still couldn't tell. However, I have learnt lichens and I can tell now. So one of the things that did for us was that it got us some media coverage. We found it was difficult to get media coverage early on, that somebody at CBC actually told us well, we don't want to encourage protest, and protesters need media coverage. So if we cover you, we're effectively supporting you, which seems quite outrageous. I mean, protest is a charter right, and we're doing something peaceful and legal. And when did media decide it was their job to decide those things? But that seemed to be what was happening. So it was pretty thrilling to have the lichen discoveries, which gave everybody something that they could talk about and get some coverage. So these were the first 5 that were found, 3 different species, 1 each of 2 of them and 3 of another one. And this red outline, as you can see, is the harvest boundary. So really at that, okay, I put this slide in to say it went on snowing. That was January 21st. It went on snowing. So what happened was the Department of Natural Resources, when the species at risk were reported, actually very promptly put a freeze on the harvest and said that they were going to send out a lichenologist to confirm the finds and also do a survey of the rest of the cut block. But they were going to do it regardless of the fact there were 2.5 feet of snow on the ground, which doesn't really allow you to see the whole trunks of the trees. So they did. About a month later, a lichenologist, a very reputable lichenologist called Chris Pepper, came out. This is his track. And he actually found 2 more of the black foam lichen, as well as a couple of lichens that were are not protected, but are rare. So this is, for those of you who don't know, this is Donna Crossland and Bob Bancroft. They came out to visit. The lichens are, it's one of the things is that it's a wonderful opportunity to actually see a lichen that's that rare in context and be able to compare it to the lookalikes. Because what we realized was that the lichens have some protection. They get this 100-meter buffer, and if we could find enough of them, we might actually be able to make the harvest unviable. Because I don't think the government really wants to give us a win by saying, gosh, you guys were right. You know, there are species at risk in this forest, and we were wrong to just put it forward for a harvest. We should have really reviewed it. I mean, they told everybody, oh, our biologists have reviewed it twice and there's no sign of any species of risk. And then it turned out that their biologists never left the desk. Like they never actually set foot in the forest. So they kind of got a bit embarrassed about that. Anyway, what we've done is decided that it's really time to teach ourselves and other people about lichens. So this is a lichen identification card that we made that gives you details about this particular, the black foam lichen. But we also invited Francis Anderson, who's a lichen expert and author, to come and do a workshop at camp. And this is everybody practicing with their hand lenses, looking at specimens that she brought. And we've realized that really at this point in time, the government has made a commitment to protect 20% of Nova Scotia's lands by 2030, but we suspect that they would like to do that very slowly and cut first and protect later. And that it's up to us and all of our groups to come together and say, no, actually, thank you very much for that commitment. We want you to protect now. Let's take all of these lands that have forests that are over 80 years old for a start, take them out of commission, take them out of the harvesting, and let's really step up and be serious about protecting our lands and not just keep on talking and logging, which is what's gone on for much too long. So we are teaching a bunch of workshops from camp, and I'll just say as the last thing that in the wake of this workshop, a couple of us found 2 more specimens in another part that it's very handy to have it be impossible to log. This is a rather fine sample. So I think I've talked enough, and I'm going to open this up to questions.
Yeah, thank you, Nina. That was a wonderful presentation and some amazing work that you're carrying out, and really exciting to find those types of lichens in that area. So yeah, we'll open things up to questions. Is there anyone? I'll turn the mute feature off. So yeah, if anyone is interested in asking a question, and you can post questions in the chat as well. Maybe just raise your hand if you would like to chat. I guess I'll ask a couple questions, Nina. I was just wondering what the response was from the province. Have any politicians or anything like that visit the camp?
Actually, wonderfully, the very first morning we set up on Thursday afternoon, on Friday morning, a car pulled up, and it was our MLA, Carmen Kerr, who hopped out and said, "Thank you very much for what you're doing,"
Nice.
which was quite remarkable. He is the forestry critic for the Liberals. I will say that a couple of us have been kind of working on educating him about forestry for about a year prior to this. But he's been great. Now, politicians, it's probably easier to work with somebody in opposition than it is once they're in power, because something strange seems to happen to politicians when they're in power, like they become sort of fixated on how they're going to get reelected. But no, he's been really terrific and very supportive in lots of kind of concrete ways. I would say that other than that, no, we haven't really gotten any traction at all from Tory Rushton, who is the Minister for Natural Resources and Renewables, nor sadly from Tim Hallman, who I had more hope of, the Department of Environment and Climate Change, nor really from Tim Houston. I think some of us were hoping there were going to be some heroes in this crew, but I'm not sure that's going to happen. I think we're going to have to be we're going to collectively have to be the heroes and hold them to that 20% promise.
I guess we have another question too here. Do you know what other aspects of your work the media would be willing to cover?
Well, I think they're quite interested in this workshops idea. I had a nice conversation with Michael Gorman from CBC about it. We've had some nibbles on the workshop aspects. So I think there's an element of cheekiness to that, but it's also genuine. When we sort of embarrassed them by finding all these species at risk, a DNR spokesman said, well, we don't really have enough experts and we do need to educate citizens. Mm-hmm. So we said, well, great, you're not doing it yet, so I think we'll start doing it and organize these workshops. And really at this point, we desperately need people all around the province to step up and say, no, actually, we don't have enough left for you to keep cutting and taking. And I'll just throw one statistic at you, which is in 1958, a quarter of all the forests in Nova Scotia were over 80 years old. Now that figure is between 1% and 5%. So basically, we could take all of those forests with trees over 80, take them off the list of available harvest areas and put them into protection. We still wouldn't have used up the 330,000 hectares that are going to need to be added to meet that 20% target. So there's really no excuse for cutting these older forests at this point. We need them more than the mills do.
Yeah, and I think these workshops are a great way to get people more involved. Hands-on work definitely helps. Barbara Hart, did you have your hand up there? Yeah, you're on mute. There we go.
I'm sorry that I've come in very late, and I apologize for that. So I've missed your presentation. Hopefully, I can get a copy of it. But my question would be, I know that I'm with the Senior Liberals Commission. Let me start there. And I'm just wondering, I know that the Liberals are in second place these days. However, I'm wondering if you did make any contact with any Liberal MLAs.
Nope, I think you might have missed that bit that Carmen Kerr, who is the Liberal Annapolis County MLA, is my MLA, came right out to camp immediately the next morning and thanked us for what we're doing. And he has remained, I have very regular contact with him and conversations, and we talk about what questions he might ask the minister. And so no, he has been great, and his constituency assistant, Evan Farron, has been great. So yeah, no, he's been terrific, actually.
Okay, I'm just wondering though, we, at the last annual general meeting of the Liberal Party, we did put forward a resolution requesting that the government, well, that we would recommend to the government that they cease all clear cutting in the province of Nova Scotia on Crown lands. I really think we've got to put their feet, as fine as this person is, who is the minister, I really think we've got to put their feet to the fire. And so, you know, what I'd like to do, of course, is go back to our people, the Liberal Party, and say, this is, you know, you guys get moving on this, put some pressure on the government, make a big deal of this, because it's serious. Anyway, I get excited.
No, I completely agree. And I think there's really, at this point, there's two things. One is we need to stop clear cutting. And in fact, we probably can't really afford to clear cut on private land either, but that's a whole hornet's nest.
I agree.
But we certainly shouldn't be cutting on Crown land. But we also, before you even, in a way, before you talk about what kind of cut you do to a piece of forest, there needs to be a decision process about what land should and shouldn't be cut at all. And that was a very key recommendation of Leahy, was we need landscape level planning. We need a plan that says, no, these areas are not available for any kind of harvesting. And then the areas that are available, let's talk about what kind of harvest.
Yeah.
So those 2 points, it isn't only about stopping clear cutting, it's also about planning what areas are going to be protected.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
All right, we have a question from Sheila Cole. Oh, you're on mute there, Sheila.
I've been muted.
There.
There we
Good
go. Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for doing this excellent presentation. It's been quite a few years since I've been directly involved in wilderness preservation, but it's so near and dear to my heart. And I actually come from Kings County, so Annapolis right next door. And so I've been reading about what you've all been up to. And I'm just so glad to have this session tonight. And so there's the raw information, but there's also the process, and what you people are doing is so important in terms of process. You know, so for those listening to the call, first of all, taking the time to educate your MLA. There you were, you know, educating him, and then he's there helping you. The other thing is, so, you know, because you have done all of this work, and there's been a lot of, I don't know, you know, how successful you've been with press per se, but I know that I've been reading a lot of the information online, you know, that keeping me posted. And so it positions us in the province. You know, you're doing the modeling for everybody else, anybody who wants to get going. You've laid the model. And again, thank you so much for that. I would encourage whoever feels up to it to keep the pressure on Tim Houston. You know, he purports to be a red Tory and progressive. He likes to say that. And I think that we should hold him to that. And, you know, this government and the government before them are so anxious about getting people coming to attracting people into the province. And they need to know that protecting our forests and protecting what we have is a key way, keeping it intact. You know, that is the investment, keeping it intact, not getting a few bucks for a few sticks that they can find anywhere. I mean, driving around, even along the side of the roads, the side of the 101 and the big highways like that, where they're cutting so deeply at the side of the road, I just look at it. And I know they say they're doing it so there's less shadow on the road. And so, you know, the snow will melt off the surface faster and all that kind of stuff. But I just look at it and I think to myself, they're so desperate that I think they'll just, they just look at trees as if they are sticks, like I'm saying. And I think they'll just cut them wherever they can get them, you know? So just in closing, thank you so much for all the work you're doing and all the other people on the team.
Well, you know, really it's a pleasure, because actually it feels better to act than to sit at home and despair. And we really are, I think, in the end game of protecting, you know, both in terms of cutting emissions, but the biodiversity crisis and the climate crisis are tied together.
Yes.
They're not going to be solved separately. And goodness, if we can't protect a bit of what we have before the last of it is gone, we're really in deep trouble. So yeah, no, I'm happy to do it. I mean, it's not always the easiest thing to do, but the company is excellent. And the food has been good too.
What was your favorite food at the camp?
Bacon and eggs, but that's me.
You're living the good life
coffee
in the camp. You're living the good life. Bacon and eggs. Holy. You're eating better than me.
But good coffee is the key. Good coffee is, there's a lot of pouting if we don't have good coffee.
Yeah, definitely, especially on those cold days and nights. I guess the biggest question is, what can people do to help?
Well, I think actually what Sheila was just saying at some level is keep pressure on in whatever way you can. Follow the camp. If you want to come out and visit us, come out and visit us. The road is no longer as perilous as it used to be. Cars with fairly low clearance get in and out. This weekend we're doing Bio Blitz, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, going in, looking for more lichens, looking for other species at risk. We have actually put in a proposal to protect a somewhat larger area around that forest. But really also in your own place, in your own area, look for what to protect and start connecting and protecting and making a noise when you learn that something is going to be cut that shouldn't be. And if you're in Halifax, then Eisner's Cove and Sandy Lake, and now it sounds also like Heartland Point, are all places that if you just Googled them, you would find information, but all of those are really in deep need of protection. But what's exciting is that people are really working on those areas. And the same with Lake Minamkiak, where the last population of Atlantic whitefish is, and the Department of Natural Resources thought it was a fine idea to allow a plan to harvest right down to the lake, within 20 meters of the lake, to allow that harvest to come up for comments. So there's lots of different ways to stand up for nature, and whatever you do is good, you know, and then tell other people about it and connect with each other so that you're not just doing it alone.
Yeah, well, we're always looking for new webinar ideas, and we love to connect Nova Scotians to issues, important issues such as this. So if anyone on the call has something similar that they're working on, we'd love to share it. So yeah, just send us an email. I'll put the email in the chat there. Does anyone have any final questions for Nina?
Nina, do you see any value in a petition on provincial level for this issue, or has that been tried already?
I think there's always a value. I don't have a lot of faith that a petition alone will do something, but if you don't have people writing letters and doing petitions, then the politicians can say, oh, it's just a few crazy people out on a logging road. So, you know, when we were trying to protect land in Digby County that was real core moose habitat, the fact that Nature Nova Scotia got 37,000 signatures on a petition to not cut that land was very helpful. And I think also when you have a petition, you're always talking to people and educating the people who might sign that petition, as well as, and that's, you know, it's easy to get focused on trying to get the government to respond. And that's often not the easiest task. But it's just as important to be talking to each other and connecting with each other and educating each other and getting motion in that way, so that we begin to come together. So in that sense, yes, I think there is. And if NSEN felt like kickstarting it, I bet you we could get it sent around to a whole lot of organizations. I mean, what I really actually want to see is, I think of it in my mind as the Last Hope campaign, just because that's how it sticks in my mind. But I would really like to see all of us come together and say to the government, hey, great job putting that 20% goal, not only as a pledge for election, but into legislation. It was put into the Environmental Goals and Climate Change Reduction Act. Now, what are you going to do to act on that right now? Because we're really not going to accept you just going on doing business as usual. But it's a wonderful lever to have, to encourage the government to do something and praise them for doing it and just insist that they actually do it, instead of twiddling their thumbs and, you know, spending 5 years coming up with a process while they finish cutting the rest of what's there. So I would love to be thinking about whether that's something of interest to enough groups and how we would come together to do that. And I see Karen's hand up.
Yeah, it looks like Karen has a question there.
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you so much, Nina. It's good to see you in this format. And every time I see you in any format, it gives me hope. So it's interesting that hope is now in the title of where you spend much of your time. Yeah, I just want to say a couple of things on action. I am so grateful that you are able to take this nonviolent direct action of camping out, because I think that's it's the way the world has changed in major ways. And it's not as legitimized in Nova Scotia or right now or something. So I think a part of the conversation right now needs to be, not only do I support more protected areas or less clear cutting, but I support the people who are out there who are, you know, doing illegal camp out right now, because I think that's just like a bridge too far for some people, but we need to bring them into, no, this is a sphere of action that is legitimate and gets things done and needs to be part of the smorgasbord of actions that we're doing. We also need to sometimes meet with our political leaders. We also need to sometimes work with government systems to change them. And sometimes we need to write letters. We need to do it all, and in one legitimate form is direct action. I think we need to get a little more used to that in Nova Scotia. And I think it also needs to start to happen more around protected areas. The 20% target is ambitious but achievable in Nova Scotia. And as far as I know, there is zero action on it right now. And that could be the case right up until the last days that the Conservatives are in power. And so if we don't make some more noise about protected areas, they're going to trickle along like they have been doing the whole time since the protected areas started in Nova Scotia. But we need a serious ramp up, right? And that's not on the agenda right now politically, and that is not in the public sphere that we need to get angry about protected areas. So I'm so glad that you're bringing that up as absolutely connected to what's going on with our forest. Is part of the working landscape right now needs to be taken out of the equation for us all to survive, and people aren't always elevating that. So thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Nina, I was just wondering, do you accept donations or anything like that to help out with this initiative? Is there any way that people could donate, say if they couldn't get to the camp but wanted to contribute in some way? Is there any way that they could contribute to help?
There certainly is. They can actually send an e-transfer to XR Anaco, as in Annapolis County, XRANNACO @gmail.com.
Perfect. So what I'll do is, so I think someone might have asked this already, but yeah, we do record the talk this evening, and we will send that off with a kind of like a little bit of a summary of the event, and we'll also have information on how you can help contribute, and yeah. And
No, and that's,
sorry, go ahead.
no, I mean, donations have been great, and we're really grateful for them. We try to run a pretty lean operation, but there is a certain amount of equipment and stuff that's necessary, but also we try to cover people's gas costs. If you're coming and camping more than once, we try to make sure that you're not the one who's footing the gas bill for that, because there are lots of people who can't come and camp but do want to help. And so spreading that out in whatever way we can has been great.
So every day,
really helps.
so every day people could just like, what's the process? They just show up there and pitch a tent. It's like, what's like?
We ask people to contact Debbie, and I could put her. Probably the easiest thing to do is xrns@riseup.net.
Yeah, I'll get all this information from you and make sure everyone gets all the information they need to help or to visit. I'll have all of that. I'll email that to all the registrants, so they'll have all that information, and as well as the video that they can watch, and we'll share it obviously on social media. And we also have caucuses. We have 3 right now: education, climate change, and water caucus. So perhaps this could be, if there's enough people that want to form a caucus, maybe this could be something to look at as far as like clear cutting and stuff like that goes in the province. Maybe it's an idea for a caucus, because we don't have one on forestry, so it would be something cool to maybe get going. Just something to think about.
Cool.
You're on mute there, Sheila. I think you're.
There we go. Okay, yeah, just jumping in quickly to say, if we do get such a caucus going, which we certainly have had in the past, there's a languaging thing there. Can we call it the Forests Caucus and not the Forestry Caucus?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that would be good.
All right. Well, we're we're at 8 o'clock. So I guess I just want to thank everyone for attending the event this evening. It's been great learning from Nina and what's going on at Last Hope Camp. And stay tuned. We'll be hosting a few more of these webinars in the coming months. And thanks so much, Nina.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me and for all that you're doing. And
Have a
I
good
just
night,
have to tell
everyone.
Chris, I heard him talking about batteries on the radio, and it was really fun. It made me really happy. So thank you.
Glad you liked it.
All right. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Nina.
Thanks.